Ah, Good morning. So, I want to share some today about befriending your nervous system as a practice of developing wellness on a physiological level, on an emotional level, and on a relational level as well. But before I dive in, first things first, I'll just invite you to allow your body to breathe in the way that feels most naturally pleasant. It's not about focusing on the breath, it's just about allowing it to find what feels naturally pleasant. No right way, no wrong way, just what feels okay. And I'll add the reminders that nothing about you needs to be any different, and that everything that I offer is an invitation. So if it doesn't feel good, don't do it. And I hope that um, what I offer feels like an invitation into your own process, into your own wisdom development, into your own practices of caring for mind, body, and spirit. Any good spiritual teacher, therapist, healer, whatever, should feel like they're inviting you into your own power. That they're giving you tools that lead you to not need them anymore. Not to say that it's bad if you need people long term. Uh, Everybody has their own process, and we all need connection to make it in this life. Um, but a good coach or healer or whatever is looking to work themselves out of a job by supporting you into developing the personal practices and the network that can support you long term. And final invitation is to allow yourself to listen in the way that feels most naturally pleasant. Let this be enjoyable. And that's a segue into this topic for me about befriending your nervous system. It's something that's really not talked about in our culture, or at least it hasn't been until recently, I would say. Um, I mean, if you look back uh, at your educational upbringing and what your parents and family taught you, how often were you really taught to listen to what your nervous system was saying, to listen to your heart, to listen to your belly? How often could you drop in and feel your belly feel good across from another person and actually feel a sense of them feeling good as well? That might sound a little weird if you haven't practiced in this sort of way before. Um, but it's actually very simple and very possible for most people, I think. Um, but our culture and the current moment of the world um, demands that we contort ourselves in various ways. And so, based on your developmental experiences, family values, and upbringing, cultural pressures like gender and race um, and sexuality, um, you end up shrinking parts of yourself or puffing parts out um, and contorting yourself and dancing around multiple contortions often um, to meet the world and the way it's shaped you. And the goal of good nervous system practices is to find some sense of freedom and nourishment through getting to know your nervous system, through becoming more um, embodied. And again, embodiment practices should always feel like an invitation. We don't want to force embodiment. We don't want to say that, a particular form of embodiment is the right way, because different bodies, different minds um, have different ways of relating to body and mind and spirit. Um, and so, what I really like to emphasize is just the gentle invitation first to build awareness. What does it actually feel like to be in your body? You can check in with yourself right now. Check in with your head, your heart, your belly. And what can be helpful is, you know, not trying to put a ton of language to anything, but just noticing the character of the places you check in with. And so you could be noticing contraction versus more loose feeling, or temperature, textures, colors, and whatever comes up that feels like vibrant and alive and present. We're not worried about story and interpretation. It's just about what are the sensations. And not worried immediately about doing anything with these things, but instead just coming into loving, pleasant connection. And when I say loving in this case, I just mean that, like, that gentle, direct, spacious attention that's like, oh, here's my heart. It feels kind of tense. Oh, I can just hold it and give it what it feels like it could use right now. Um, these are just some of the little things that you can start to do to feel good. Um, and that's sort of like a mindfulness, like moment to moment practice that you can just do throughout a day. Um, um, but what you can also do while you're doing any sort of activity, whether it's a work activity or a pleasure activity, um, or anything else, um, is to really practice doing so in a way that feels naturally pleasant and naturally good on your nervous system. So often when we take on like self-care things, like perhaps exercise, we're often trying to, again, contort ourselves to what our goal is. Or we get into the sort of like work reward, work reward, work reward thing that in a lot of ways it takes us out of nervous system alignment, it takes us out of presence. For instance, oftentimes when we're exercising, it's like, okay, I'm going to run, and running is how I earn my reward, where I'll treat myself to ice cream or whatever, just for example. And so you're like, well, I got to run this far and do it in this amount of time to earn that. Um, and then if I do that, I get this ice cream. The problem with that is one, while you're running, you're not actually listening to how your body wants to move. And so running, one, becomes less pleasant. Two, it's less sustainable, because if you're not listening to your body, you're more likely to injure yourself or create chronic problems. Um, and you can accomplish all of your goals without putting yourself through that type of constraint. And it's actually much more pleasant. I got in my favorite era of running, and some of the best shape I was in my adult life. I was prepping for a race. I didn't like the race all that much by the end of it, for sure. Um, but the actual getting in shape process was really fun, because I took this as a practice of, I'm going to move how my body wants to move each day. And so some days it felt really good, and it was like, oh, I'm going to I'm really enjoying going pretty fast and bounding across the earth, like feeling my sort of animal body want to do that. It felt great. Um, and then other days it was just like, oh, my body is not feeling it. but I would still go out and I would just enjoy the walk that my body wanted to go on. I would enjoy the trees, I would enjoy the sunlight, and I would, attune to what level of pushing myself felt nice. That goal of like being in shape for the race was still there. And so there was still a natural pressure to it, but it was held with a non-urgency that was like, I can trust my system to move the way it wants to move and do it in the way that feels most pleasant. And it was beneficial both for my physical health and as a nervous system and mindfulness practice that really served me. And why this is important too, with that work reward sort of thing, when you put yourself in, okay, I got to work this way to earn this reward, you take yourself out of presence while you're running or doing whatever work it is. And then when you get to the reward, you're so out of presence practice that the reward is won over before you know it. You're not really practiced at being in presence and enjoying things as you're doing them. You actually need to apply that both to things that seem unpleasant or difficult and to things that seem pleasant, by practicing caring for yourself no matter what you're doing. But then also, when you get to that reward, you've built it up in a certain way. And it might not actually be in alignment with what your body wants, but because you built it up, you've just built up your idea of what would be nourishing. You might be so far out of alignment you don't even realize it. And so like reward and pleasure and enjoying treats and things like that can be a much healthier practice. Again, if you're listening to your body, listening to your nervous system, allowing food to be a practice of nervous system alignment. And that's a matter of really just getting into this trial and error practice. None of this is ever going to be perfect. Intuition isn't something you can just say, I need to trust my intuition. Instead, it's a practice of cultivating intuition. It's like, oh, I have to trust what my belly says because my therapist is saying I should trust my intuition more. It's not so simple. The goal isn't to trust some idea of what intuition is. It's instead to cultivate intuition such that the intuitive senses, so the things that we label as intuitive, like a gut sense or a feeling in your heart or whatever, is in communication with other aspects of your experience. It's in communication with your mind as well. So you're using all of your tools. All that to say, when it comes to treating yourself, as opposed to building up the idea from a place of, well, I've got to grind myself to work to meet my goal, and then I can indulge in the thing. Instead, those things don't become paired in such a strict and constricted sort of way. And instead, you can just enjoy treats whenever you feel like. Because over time, like your body being attuned to your nervous system, you'll get to know what level of treating yourself releases the joy chemicals in the right way without leaving your body feeling kind of crappy. Because you're not doing it as this sort of contingency that's tied so strictly to this thing, this other thing, that actually they don't need to be tied together. And you can find a much more natural way of being. And the final piece I'll talk about is taking this into a relationship, which is a really big part of how I work, and a really thing that was really important for me in moving through relationship challenges and family difficulties and things like that. Another cultural thing that we do is we live in our ideas of relationships. We live in our ideas of ourselves and our ideas of other people. And befriending your nervous system is letting go of a lot of the idea and spending more time and just attuning to what feels nourishing and what doesn't. And you naturally start to grow towards what feels good. And taking this into a relationship is starting to let go of a lot of the ideas of your relationships and starting to, again, attune to what feels good. And so we can get ourselves caught up in so many things in our relationships. That's like, oh, well, this person in my in my um, in my personal life, you know, they say these things, but I really think they mean these things. Here's their, I'm trying to analyze their intentions and, well, what's happening to me, what's happening to them, blah, 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 blah. And you can really get yourself tied up in all these knots. But developing that intuition, making that an intuitive practice, you want to first get to that really, really simple level of what does it feel like in real time to be in connection with this person? Oh, when I'm in connection with this person, my belly relaxes. That feels nice. Or when I even think about being in connection with that person, my whole body tenses up and I kind of want to shrink. And when you start to honor these things, as opposed to getting hooked by the stories and worries and anxieties that your brain builds up, you start to, one, just naturally navigate your interpersonal landscape more intuitively, more artfully. And then it gives you tools for analyzing the more complex aspects while being grounded in that embodied truth. Because really, and I'll probably talk about this more in future videos, story itself is never the truth. The most it can do is point towards the truth. That's not dismissing story. Story is very important. But it can never be the truth itself. The best it can do is point towards it. What you're actually experiencing in real time, that's as close as you can get to truth. That's perhaps truth there. The truth of what it is to be in connection with another person. And so the more points of direct connection with yourself and your sense of the relationship in real time, you can cultivate a much healthier, much more freeing and nourishing way of dancing in your relational field. More to come about that. I hope to record a couple of videos soon on the services that I offer and how I can provide support. Really recommend checking out the links below to see my website, to see my Facebook for live events and virtual events. You can follow me on Patreon. That's especially good for the virtual events. And really appreciate the support there. Right now, it's just $5 a month, or you can pay more if you want. Yeah, so if you're liking this, a like and subscribe would be cool. Would love to hear your thoughts, reflections. I welcome challenges as well. Hope you're well. Take good care of yourselves today. I'm going to enjoy this bright, shiny day in the Pacific Northwest, which is always a gift. So take good care.